Senator Fraser, welcome to Gatton, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Jim.
There's been a lot of controversy surrounding you in recent times, and it seems to have resulted in you drawing a large crowd here today, and everybody seemed to be very keen to listen to you, and your speech drew a lot of very positive comments, in spite of the negative comments you've been getting from the media. So what do you put this down to?
Well, Jim, we've got a very left-wing media, as you know. They'll never show what I say. They'll cut and paste wherever they can. Some of them could probably do an interview without me, actually, and then just report what they decide to report. But one day, hopefully, in this country, we might have a media that will give an unbiased report and let the Australian people make up their mind. We've seen what happened in America with CNBC and NBC and ABC. After Donald Trump was exonerated, their viewing audience plummeted by sometimes up to 50%, because people realised that they'd been lying to them all along, and that's exactly what this media does to the people of Australia. It's time it was changed.
We've all heard the comments about you and the terms white supremacist in the same sentence. I think a lot of people were quite interested to notice that your number 2 on the Senate ticket is a very dark-skinned man of Indian origin, a more passionate Australian you could never meet. So how do you think your opponents would evaluate such a running partner of yours?
Well, I don't know. I've never advocated for a white Australia policy, as they keep saying. Paul Taylor, as you said, is my number 2 on the Senate ticket. Very brilliant man, very articulate, very passionate about this country, a decent Christian conservative. So I guess they're just going to have to find something else to, another tag for me. They hang a lot of tags on you. The minute you don't agree with the socialist agenda, you'll have tags. So as soon as you know you're a neo-Nazi or a white supremacist or a homophobe or whatever they like to put on you, you know you must be upsetting them a little bit, and that's exactly what they do.
It was interesting to note that one of your candidates today expressed to me prior to his speech that he was reluctant and having second thoughts about saying that he was a veteran. And it seemed quite bizarre that a man who should be proud of having served his country, 2 tours in Afghanistan, I believe, has second thoughts about saying that. What do you think has happened in our society that makes a man have second thoughts about saying something of which he should be most very proud?
Yeah, isn't it terrible? The reason we have freedoms here, or we still have some freedoms, they're gradually being eroded or rapidly being eroded by the left-wing parties. And unfortunately the Liberals are included in that, but they're the people, the veterans are the people we should be respecting and honouring for their service, not have them worried about admitting that they're a veteran. The reason we have the freedoms is people died in the trenches for our freedoms, and here we have veterans who are getting a bit worried about talking about it, and that's a terrible situation. We need to start turning this country around. We don't need any more of this socialist bullshit. We need to get back on course again and reclaim our sovereignty.
It has been said that none of our politicians, or very few of our politicians, have a long-term vision for this country, that they basically have a 3-year horizon and that they're time servers. What are your thoughts on that subject?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They don't have any long-term vision. We need nation-building projects again in this country. We haven't built a decent dam for 35 years. We need to build dams in the north and capture all that beautiful water that's running out to sea, destroying the reef. We could put it across the range. We could water the inland with the Bradfield scheme, the revised Bradfield scheme, plus other schemes. Bringing the Tully, the Herbert, the Burdekin to Hell's Gate Dam, into the Tate, the Lynn, the Walsh, the Cloncurry, the Flinders. We can literally irrigate millions and millions of acres and turn Australia into the food bowl of the world. And all it takes is a little bit of political will and some people who start seeing past 3 years and start looking at a 10, 20, 50, 100-year projects that will build a nation similar to the Snowy River scheme. But unfortunately, the people I'm down there in Canberra with, they're career politicians, the great majority of them, and the parties are only interested in getting back in for another 3 years. And so the members of those parties can't vote against the party, and that's part of our problem.
I think you just named a plethora of rivers in North Queensland. I would suggest perhaps that many of our politicians in Canberra had never heard of those rivers or wouldn't know where they were. So I guess that's going to make it hard for them to actually want to do something with it. Do you ever get tired of trying to explain to your opponents that Islam is actually not a race, but a political and religious ideology and not a race, hence the tag racism? Do you think there's any way to get that across, or do you think the media are always going to have a stacked deck in that regard?
Yeah, well, I can't understand them. The Greens and Labor are so pro-Islam, and of course, there's some proper freaks in that group, and they'd be the target of once they have Sharia law here, if they ever got it. A lot of those people would be the first ones on the chopping block. So how they class me as a racist, and as you say, Islam is not a race; it's an ideology of hate, and it is the most vile, barbaric ideology on the planet today, and it's the greatest threat to Western civilization today. If we don't stop it, and if we don't stop them coming here and start repatriating the ones who are here, these barbaric buggers who want to kill people in churches and attack us in the streets, killing our children and our women and men in the streets, then Australia's in real trouble. And I'm sure that those political parties understand the dangers. It's not hard to look at what's happened in France, Germany, Belgium, Sweden. They're starting to become basket cases, and we're heading straight down the same road. We've got to stop it.
Well, it has been suggested that various cultures that come here should be allowed to practice their own cultural beliefs within the Australian context and have their own separate beliefs, and whilst being a part of the Australian community at large, carry out their own individual cultural practices. Now, in the case of Islam, of course, that would would you be prepared to accept that if Islam was allowed to partake of Sharia law here, would you be prepared to tolerate, for example, genital mutilation of little girls, marriages of 6-year-old girls, throwing homosexuals off buildings? I think that would probably clean out half of Canberra. But these practices, which the average Christian and Australian would find abhorrent, do you think there's any room in our society to allow these people to carry out these what we consider barbaric, but for them it's every day? Do you think there's any room in our society at all for them to be able to do this?
No, absolutely not. It's the last thing we need in a country like Australia, where we're a homogenous country. In the 1970, we were 99% European. People got on. We've had a lot of races come to this country who have helped us build it: the Greeks, the Italians, the Indians, Chinese, Sikhs, all sorts of people, the Filipinos, the Thais. They've come here, they've integrated, and they've helped us build a great nation. That's never going to happen with these Islamic, with the Muslims. They will never integrate, unfortunately. There are good Muslims, everyone knows that, just like there were good Germans in the Second World War. Unfortunately, the majority of them, the decent ones, are irrelevant. It's always the hardliners who drive the agenda. Most Germans weren't Nazis, but unfortunately 11 million people were marched into gas chambers. We don't need Islam in this country. It's never going to integrate. There's been 52 nations around this planet that started off as Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, or Jewish, that are now Islamic nations. And the only thing that's happening to the Christians, the Jews, the Hindus, and the Buddhists is they're being slaughtered in those nations. Why would anyone in their right mind think that the same thing wouldn't happen here? It's happened in every single country they've got a foothold in, and it will happen here. So we have to understand that they are the enemy, and we have to stop them coming in here. We cannot keep importing our enemy.
Senator Fraser, and all the best in the coming election.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, Jim. Thank you.